sacrifice is nothing else but the creation myth. That is, by sacrificing himself, Purusha created the world. So every person imitates that particular great act. And he goes on imitating so that he becomes one with him, the creator. This is the basic thing. Then, by simply repeating something, you cannot gain it, no? It becomes more mechanical. So, a point was there, that is why the Brahmanas came. That is what is the secret of the sacrifice. So, every act was being explained. And why this is to be done? Because then it ultimately supports the meaning, which is the ultimate meaning of the sacrifice, or symbolism of the sacrificial acts, you can say. So after the karma, jnana was more emphasized. There was a stage when that had to be emphasized.
This you were talking about the early...
No, development of the Vedic religious thought. मगर then ज्ञान तो मेरे जैसे लोगों को भी है ना. But I have not realized Brahman by simply reading, by simply repeating words. Cannot do that. And that is why it was realized that the Brahman is to be realized through meditation. Shrotavyo, mantavyo, nididhyasitavya. उसका अध्यास लगना चाहिए. You should be totally after it. That is, you go on meditating upon the nature of the first principle. अब ये जो निधिध्यास है, उसके साथ भी कभी पूरा नहीं हो सकता है. हो सकता है. One becomes mad, but he does not need. So the idea came that Brahman, though it is abstract, though it chooses you. मैं लाख कहूँ कि मुझे ये चाहिए, मगर उसको तुम चाहिए या नहीं. So this choice comes of the Brahman. And then he chooses only the selected few. So when he chooses you, it is a reciprocal relationship that you should have devotion for him. And then he chooses you. Then Prasad is there. Prasad has got a different meaning in Sanskrit. When the water is clear, it is said prasannam apaha. जहाँ सब मैल जो है पानी में से तो नीचे बैठ जाता है, तब वाटर जो है क्लियर होता है. So similarly, your mind becomes prasanna only when the dirt in it settles down. That is the indication of his prasada. So he chooses you only after that, and that comes only यज्ञो दानं तपः कर्म पावनानि मनीषिणाम. पावन करते हैं ये लोग, मन को पावन करते हैं ना, यज्ञ दान तप. तो ये सब करने के बाद फिर भक्ति के सहारे. तो भगवद गीता का ये पूरा जो एसेंस जो कहते हैं ना उपनिषद का, तो ध्यास जो है वहाँ ध्यान आता है, meditating upon it. And then that meditation is first of all through gross objects. And then how can you meditate upon a subtle thing which cannot be described? So first of all, it's gross representatives. And then you can meditate upon him. So this is the way yoga is to be understood. So yoga is ultimately, that is why Dhyana Yoga is one of the yogas in Bhagavad Gita.
And very interestingly, sir, these meditation initially in Bhairavigyan also, they used to meditate upon the physical things, various physical things.
Gross, it comes from gross to subtle.
Yes, sir. You mentioned about the meditation.
That is why tapas में जो पंचाग्नि तपस करता है, तो 4 अग्नि तो है. So that his attention should not be distracted anywhere. But he has to look at the sun. That is the 5th Agni. He meditates upon that. So there are different Mahabhutas which are meditated upon. See, basic thing regarding Buddhism is that basic object is to annihilate grief. Dukha Nirodha Marga hai. And that Ashtangika Marga is in nutshell told as prajna, shila and samadhi. Wisdom, that is the teachings of the Buddha, when you really understand them, then you have to bring those teachings into your day-to-day life. That is shila, character. And then samadhi. So these are the three things which annihilate your dukkha. This is the dukkha nirodha marga. But then, why do you get dukkha? Why you are affected by grief and sorrow? Because there are, and that is called Vedana. There are two concepts like Vedana and Saujna. Vedana is feeling. Feeling the pleasure or the sorrow of, or grief of, after an experience. According to Lord Buddha, you go on having experiences like this, full of sorrow, full of pleasure, mixed things. And then every time your mind is now set that I would like to have only pleasure and not sorrow. So this is called Saujna, that this is my good experience, this is my bad experience. I would like to avoid the bad experience, I would like to have the good experience. So by itself, actually, that experience is only for a moment. But then your attachment to that experience brings you into trouble. And therefore, when one meditates, this particular thing, that this experience is good and this experience is bad, that particular sensation you have to overcome. And then only you can have dukkha nirodha marga. This is the basic principle of vipassana, as you can find it. Whereas in the Patanjali yoga, the same type of ashtangika marga has been told. But then it is told that you have to meditate upon that. And as I explained to you, that shrotavya, mantavya, nididhyasitavya, these are the various stages you have to understand. Then you have to all the time think about it and then meditate upon it. But the meditation for a common man or a novice or an initiate, it is not possible immediately. He cannot do that. Some people might do it, but it has to have some exercise. So that exercise is to be done, first of all, on gross objects. And therefore, in the Upanishads, the various types of meditations which have been told, these are about Panchamahabhutas. Say, for example, the best being, the representative being Surya or Agni, wherein one meditates upon the manifestation of the first principle. One of the best manifestations of the first principle is Surya itself. So you meditate upon Surya. You meditate upon different types of objects. It can be even a tree or any such thing. So any sacred object, and from that gross object, you slowly turn yourself to the subtle things and ultimately reach a proper dhyana of the ultimate reality. And that as I explained to you in the Vedic thought, unless that first principle chooses you, you cannot choose him. You are after him. But unless that chooses you, you cannot get that final understanding or realization through meditation also. So that is why Bhakti is later on emphasized. So Bhakti and Yoga, in ultimate sense of the term, these are different words, you see. A person is mad, so dhyasa is already there. Nididhyasa is there. But at the same time, a fervent desire, that is expressed through Bhakti. That I would like to be one, I would like to know that first principle. So in later words you can say, so that is why jnana, karma, jnana, dhyana, and then bhakti. That is how the whole thing comes up. And as I told you, that, well, this development comes, this is represented by sacrifice, for example. The sacrifice, first of all, doing the sacrifice is the Shruti period, you can say, in which certain acts are done in accompaniment of the sacred words or praises which are in the praise of the Lord. And those things are accompanied, and that way you perform the sacrifice and become one with him, the Prajapati. But then, unless you know the secret of it, you can mechanically go on repeating the things. And that is to be avoided. That is why the Brahmanas explain you the secret of the sacrifice. And then in search of that, when you get convinced that all these sacrifices are also Trayi Nirmita, as it is called, that they are the creation of the three Vedas. You have to go beyond that. That first principle is beyond. You cannot simply, you can become at the most the Swarga, but then from Swarga again you have to come back. So when that cycle goes on, it is only when you realize that Brahman that you become, and for that dhyana is very much needed, for that prasada and bhakti is very much needed. And this is the basic thing. And this period when it developed, it is, you can say, the last stages are the Upanishads, where in the early Upanishads they talk about the Brahman, which is settled, and through different vidyas which are there, whether it is the Nachiketa Vidya which was learned by Nachiketa from Yama, because Mrityu is the ultimate thing. What is the secret of my death? And then you will find that the Seshwara Upanishads come in, that is the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, Mundaka Upanishad, and Mandukya Upanishad, wherein the ultimate principle is identified with Rudra. So you have to meditate upon Rudra. That is how it has been told. And this period will be roughly from something like 8th century BC to about 5th century BC. And curiously enough, the yoga aspect is emphasized in Buddhism also. It is not a coincidence that Buddha, when he wanted to be away from the sufferings, he was in the quest of the way to do away with all the sufferings in this world, of existence, of transmigration, and of being born and again. He first of all went to two yoga acharyas. And those two yoga acharyas, please remember one thing, that they in their understanding of the different swargas, the two acharyas are in the highest swarga, Brahma Vihara Swarga. So they are topmost, they are just a step away from nirvana. That is how the Buddhist think, or the Buddhist thought thinks about them. So yoga has an important place, and as I told you, it is one of the main three components. So we'll find that dhyana is the part of the tripartite, you can say, essence of the Ashtangika Marga, Prajna, Shila and Samadhi. So that part Buddha learned from the yoga acharyas. But he said that there is something beyond, and that is the realization that everything is ephemeral, and there is no such thing as you call the Atman. Here differs the Upanishad philosophy and Buddha, but all the same, the yoga part is taken into consideration. The philosophy is somewhat similar to Sankhya also, where Prakriti and Purusha is there, but he doesn't accept Purusha as an eternal thing. He thinks that the whole Prakriti and its game is there. You have to be away from the illusion that somebody is ensnared in that. You are not that person. Everything is ephemeral. So Anattaya, that is one of the things, and Kshanabhangurata is another principle. But it has got its own importance in Buddhist principles. The dhyana gets an important position in the development of Buddhism itself. It is when the Shravakayana is not there, which is popularly known as Hinayana. After that is the Bodhisattvayana. And in Bodhisattvayana, again Nagarjuna emphasizes his doctrine of nihilism through Madhyamaka Yogachara, that everything is ephemeral. There are two types of satyas, Paramarthika Satya and you can say this Vyavaharika Satya. The terms employed are different. But then there are three levels of Satya, and in that, in the doctrine of Mahayana as propounded by the Vijnanavadins, Chitta is the only thing, and therefore again The whole emphasis is on Chitta and Adaya Vijnana. So through meditation again, you have to attain that. So the importance of meditation goes on growing in a way, you can say, in the later period. So it has got its own importance, but it takes different shades and roles in the development of the Buddhist thought. Traditional believing point of view, the Vedas don't have any time because they are the breathings of the Lord. Yasya nishvasitam Vedaha. The Vedas are the breathings of the Lord. When the Lord Himself is eternal, His breathings cannot be simply, you can say, ephemeral things. So, from traditional point of view, the Vedas are apaurushaya, even though they have been transmitted through the Rishis. The Rishis have seen them. That is how the traditional way of thinking will be. But historically, when we think, rationally, when we think about as we thought about the development of the religious thought, because this type of treatment or discussion won't be allowed by the traditional people. But then when we think it from that point of view, now the sober thinking is that Vedas can be roughly dated. Vedas have different, you can say, layers. Rigveda itself has different layers, earlier and later portions. And people have devoted, actually spent their life on discussing which is the earlier portion of the Veda, which is the later portion of the Veda. The core things are, of course, the Rishi Mandalas, 2 to 7, and the 8th and 9th, which are the Soma Mandalas. 1st and 10th are Kshudra Sutta and Mahasuktas. But this is not that simple. Shunashyapa, who was adopted as the eldest son by Vishwamitra, his sukta is not there in Vishwamitra Mandala. His suktas are in the Kshudra Sutta and Mahasuktas. So really we cannot talk about from that point of view. We'll have to take, as the scholars will say, every rucha by itself and then try to establish earlier and later from our historical point of view. Still, sober thinking now accepts that Rigveda can be dated from anywhere between 2000 to 3000 BC, at least. So, if that is to be taken, then the later Samhitas, that is Yajurveda and its various shakhas, the Shukla and Krishna Yajurveda, Samaveda is nothing else but a later development in the elaborate sacrifices where, while praising Soma and during the 3 Savanas, the Pratah Savana, Madhyandina Savana and the later Savana, those are to be recited. So Rigveda sung is Samaveda. So we need not date. We can say this tradition came in the elaborate sacrifices at the most. Though Soma ritual, as in Avesta, is one of the earliest rituals and core portion of the ritual of the Vedas. So that way you cannot date it. But still you can say Samaveda was an understanding of a later period because Samaveda, the Udgata, has a role in the bigger sacrifices. Atharva Veda, again people say that, well, Atharva Veda, some of the portions, they are very common with Rigveda. So some of the portions of Atharva Veda are with Rigveda, though some of the things are obviously later according to them. This is how it is understood. This can be, so the later 3 Vedas can be after, you can say 2000 BC, that is roughly from 1900 BC to about, say, 1000 BC. Because Aitareya, which is the earliest of the Brahmanas, is 1000 to 1100 BC. Then all these Brahmanas, they can cover up to something like 8th, 7th. As I told you, some of the things are overlapping. So roughly 8th, 7th BC. So the Upanishads will be something like 7th century BC. And as I explained to you, that there are 2 phases. The Seshwara Upanishads, this is a term newly coined. This is not a Sanskrit term. Theistic Upanishads can be placed in the later period, wherein Rudra is identified with the first principle. So this way, the dating can be done roughly. And this is very significant because some of the proto-yoga things, practices, which are understood in the Aranyaka and Upanishad portions of the Veda as a whole, they are also presupposed by Buddhism. by Buddha, and to some extent by Mahavira. So, because in Buddhism, in Buddha's biography, these two ascetics, they have a very important role to play. He follows them, he understands them, but he does not throw away. He uses those skills in his own Ashtangika Marga, wherein dhyana has an important place. So if we take into consideration that the yoga things are definitely pre-Buddha, pre-Buddhist, so definitely 6th, 7th century BC. So our understanding about the rough calculation or placement of the Upanishads can definitely be 6th, 7th century BC. So this way you have to look at the whole chronology of the Vedas and the place of the Upanishads and of course indirectly the date of the yogic practices.